My first action as Premier will be to call a Royal Commission into the construction sector.
Victoria's new Premier, Ben Carroll, has announced a Royal Commission into the state's building industry.
We will also immediately establish a special prosecutor that will work in parallel with the Royal Commission.
It follows years of reporting exposing alleged corruption, organised crime links and misconduct within the sector, and years of resistance from the government and former Premier Jacinta Allan. The Commission now has the potential to examine what happened and who knew about it, forcing powerful figures in politics, business, unions and the underworld to answer questions under oath and in public. I'm Daniel James, and you're listening to 7am. Today, investigative reporter for The Age, Nick McKenzie, on what the Royal Commission must uncover and the big names who could be called to testify. It's Friday, July 31. Nick, good to see you again. Over many years of painstaking investigative journalism, you've exposed big bill corruption. Throughout it all, you've maintained the pressure for a Royal Commission, which Jacinta Allan famously or infamously resisted. How are you feeling this week? Do you feel like you're somehow responsible for Allan's demise, given it's widely accepted that this issue was a big part of what resulted in her losing the leadership?
I think it's unquestionable that journalism played a massive part in exposing not just to the public, but to the body politic, what was going on these government projects and Labor government projects. And there was so much wrongdoing and so much reporting of that wrongdoing, it was inescapable. And the Premier, or the former Premier now, Jacinta Allan, quite famously or infamously said she'd tough it out.
Further now, will you call a Royal Commission? Will you hunt down the money that taxpayers may have lost to organised crime?
As I said earlier on that claim, the administrator says that claim is not well tested or properly founded.
But story after story after story, it just kept building up. And it got to the point where her failure to act appropriately in the early days meant it really was inevitable that there had to be a Royal Commission. I mean, the time had passed for there to be other responses. So entrenched was her refusal to call a proper inquiry, and so significant was the amount of evidence suggesting that the wrongdoing was systemic and entrenched.
Perhaps the very first utterance from the new Victorian Premier, Ben Carroll, was the announcement of a Royal Commission into the big bill corruption. What do we know so far about any of the details around that?
Well, nothing really, except that the new Premier has promised this Royal Commission will look under every rock that needs to be looked under. So look at the politicians, look at the union officials, look at the gangsters, look at the companies. There's lots of players here. Look at the regulatory and policing agencies, which previously failed to do a good job or the job required. But, I mean, that's just rhetoric at the moment. We want to see what the terms of reference are when they're released. We need to see who the Royal Commissioner or Commissioners are or is. They need to be independent and needs to be appropriately empowered. So to have the power to tap bones, have the power to call coercive hearings where gangland figures like Mick Addo have to come and answer questions. They need to be appropriately resourced. The Commission needs to have teams of investigators, analysts, etc. doing the digging. There's no point having a Royal Commission if it doesn't have the capacity to properly investigate. So the devil will be in the detail, excuse the cliche, and we're yet to find out what that detail looks like.
There's so much to this story which you've untangled over many years. What are the main issues you think need to be covered and questions that need to be answered by a Royal Commission?
Well, to boil it right down, basically what happened was the Labor government and the Premier, Jacinta Allan, bestowed just immense power on a very lawless entity in the form of the Victorian branch of the CFMEU, the construction union, at the very time it was in bed with the gangland, with bikie clubs, with figures like Mick Addo. And that power enabled the CFMEU and its gangland mates to become gatekeepers on the big bill, to take over parts of mega projects, to put their mates on projects. We had bikie gang members running amok as union officials. We had subcontracting firms owned by gangland figures getting the sweet deals on these mega projects. We had labour hire companies in bed with the CFMEU, sometimes in bed with gangland figures, winning contracts, turning over literally billions of dollars. And this was only possible because the Labor government gave the CFMEU the big green light to do what it pleased on these taxpayer-funded projects. So that's what happened. Who's responsible? Well, the politicians had to give that green light. Jacinta Allan either gave the green light wittingly or recklessly by not stopping it when it was occurring. Daniel Andrews, the Premier before her, must have known something about this, and if he didn't, he's negligent. The public servants answering to the politicians, what did they know? We know they tried to raise the alarm and we suspect ignored, but did they try hard enough? Were they acting without fear, without favour, doing their job as public servants? And then all the way down, the companies that profited, the union officials that filled their pockets or got their mates sweet jobs corruptly, the law enforcement agencies that are now acting and doing a good job but previously were not. Well, why did they turn a blind eye? So there's a lot to unravel here, and the Royal Commission is the right place to do it.
Some Royal Commissions are more successful than others, often due to the powers and the scope given to them and given to the Commissioner. Do you have faith that Ben Carroll will do what's needed so that this Royal Commission truly gets to the bottom of what's been going on in the building sector? Or is there a risk that the new Premier and the government are using this Royal Commission as a way of controlling the narrative around this scandal?
Oh, I don't want to sound too cynical, but I don't think any Australian should have faith in any politician. We judge them on their actions. At the moment, we're yet to see what Ben Carroll puts into place, and he'll be judged on his actions. The temptation will be a political cover-up in the guise of a commission. But I think if he does that, the public, the media, anyone watching on will be able to see what's going on. So I think the good news is the election's 4 months away. If he tries to do a shifting, it's going to be readily apparent and voters are going to remember it. So the pressure is on for this Commission of Inquiry, this Royal Commission, to have all the powers it needs, to be run by someone who's not, a Labor Party stooge or a union buster on the right, the sort of person we might see the coalition put in place if it wins power. We need an apolitical, independent corruption digger who's going to go all the way. And if we don't get that, the media will keep doing what we've been doing pretty successfully today. It's exposing this mess relentlessly, thoroughly, exhaustively, until the right outcome is reached.
Have you created a little shortlist for yourself, Nick, as to who you would like to see as the Commissioner?
No, I think it's dangerous for journalists to start doing those sorts of things. It's the job of the government to do that. It's our job to hold them to account. I know what sort of commissioner I'd like. Tony Fitzgerald of the famous Fitzgerald Inquiry in the 80s in Queensland, which brought the Bjelke-Petersen government and the corrupt police force to heel. I think we need a corruption buster like Tony Fitzgerald. So what sort of a bloke was he? He was apolitical. He was fearless. He was determined. He wasn't scared. And he wasn't doing anyone any favours, be they senior police or the ministers of the day. So we need the same sort of person to be running the show down in Victoria, or else we'll get a perpetuation of the cover-up we've seen in place for 2 years.
Coming up, the big-name politicians and gangsters who could be called to testify. Now, let's talk about who can be brought forward before the Royal Commission. Would you like to see Jacinta Allan testify, and what questions would you like to see her answer?
I don't think it's a question of what I like to see her. I think it's the Victorian public must see her question, because she was the transport infrastructure minister when all this rot on her projects happened. She was happy to cut the ribbons and take the political points for doing so, but beneath the surface, this corruption was brewing and then becoming out of control. So, ultimately, she's got to take the stand. The Premier, prior to her, Daniel Andrews, is also responsible, if not directly, just via the Westminster system of accountability and responsibility. If the Premier, Jacinta Allan, the former Premier, if she did not know as Minister what was going on her projects, then she's failed in her ministerial duties. If she knew and didn't act, then she's also failed. But she's got to be put to the test. Those questions need to be put to her. The evidence about what she knew or didn't know needs to be uncovered and presented. But also taking a stand needs to be people like John Setka, in charge of the union when it ran amok. He put in place a culture at that CFMU where the law was irrelevant and unionists could act with impunity. We need other union officials who are running out of control also grilled, interrogated. We need the gangland figures. We need Mick Gatto on the stand and his gangland mates about how they were profiting from the big build and other major construction projects. We need bikie bosses investigated. We need the cops up there. The police in Victoria have done a very good job over the last 18 months, but they were utterly missing in action before that. So why weren't the police doing their job? Why wasn't WorkSafe how health and safety regulator on workplaces. Why was it allowing gangland figures, bikies, to be in charge of health and safety on these major government sites? Really an extraordinary situation that was allowed to take hold. So WorkSafe needs to have its people up on the stand. There's many people, let's not forget those company bosses that have profited massively from the big build. These are companies that sometimes employed well-known members of outlaw motorcycle gangs. Why'd they do that? Because they knew they'd keep the unit on side and the money would keep flowing to their coffers. They have to be held to account as well.
You've uncovered so much, but do you think that there's more to this story? Could there be more bombshells to come out through a Royal Commission?
I've got no doubt. The media at its best gets 20% of the picture. This corruption scandal lies in the heads of gangland figures who profited. It lies in the filing cabinets in government. It lies in the secret briefing notes, cabinet briefing notes that were sent to Jacinta Allan when she was Premier and Transport Minister. It lies in bank accounts that we can never access. It lies on phone taps, conversations of crooks that have no doubt been captured in other investigations, but which relate to this sort of activity. There's a lot there that we're yet to find out about. And I think every Victorian, every Australian which has been paying for these projects, feeding this corruption, deserves to know what's really going on.
And what can a good Royal Commissioner do that the Fourth Estate and journalists can't?
Well, I think we've seen people like extreme examples. Both Jacinta Allan and Mick Gatto have made an art form of avoiding questions and coming up with slippery answers. When the Royal Commission puts someone in the box, they are under oath, they have to answer questions, they can't refuse, they can be presented with the evidence the Royal Commission hopefully digs up. And what can a Royal Commission do given those powers? It can find the truth. It can hold the allegedly corrupt to account. It can clear people as well. If Jacinta Allan has a good story to tell and it absolves her of wrongdoing, and I doubt that will be the case, but if it does, then so be it. The evidence will come out, it'll be tested, and we'll find out really who it was that has profited improperly and who it was that has not done their job as a politician to protect the public interest, to protect taxpayer funds.
And finally, Nick, Jeffrey Watson, who was tasked with reporting on CFMEU operations under John Sector, says they should build a statue of you because of the reporting you've done on this. I mean, what do you reckon about that? Do we need a big bronze Nick McKenzie statue? Does that appeal to you? Would you melt down some of your Walkleys and use that to build it so it'll be, as large as the Statue of Liberty?
Oh, this is the last thing Victoria needs is another statue of some wannabe half-wit. No, thank you. Let's spend that money. Let's get the best detectives in this state. They're digging up stuff. Let's make sure this Royal Commission works. The journalism played a role, and I'm proud of the role I played. But I can only play my role because brave people, especially brave unionists, call them out. People in the CFMEU who never took a backward step, who said, you know what, I don't want my union getting taken over by Mick Gatto. I don't want my union getting taken over by Gatto's sycophants like John Sector, who, if he wasn't busy standing over a project, was busy standing over his ex-wife. What sort of a leader was that? These brave unionists stood up for what was right, and they should be celebrated. Because this is all about fighting for what's really important, which is honest unionism, something I think Victoria needs, but it's got to be honest.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for your work on all of this, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for the chance to talk.
Also in the news, Federal Labor MP Luke Gosling has been charged with 2 counts of assault. The claims relate to an incident at a Darwin community event earlier this month involving Northern Territory Administrator David Connolly, whose role is the equivalent to a state governor. Gosling, who is facing 2 charges of assault, says he's cooperating with police. He has previously rejected the allegations as ridiculous. And Optus is being sued in the federal court over last year's 14-hour network outage, which saw callers unable to reach 000. The communications watchdog ACMA is heading up the case, claiming Optus breached its legal obligations around emergency calls more than 1,000 times. It's facing a penalty of up to $250,000 per breach. 2 deaths were linked to the outage. I'm Daniel James. You've been listening to 7am. We'll be back tomorrow.